Chapter 7 of Bite-Sized Tales, the Flash Fiction audio podcast. In this third part of our Halloween story, you get the perspective of Sam, the gas station attendant from the very first story. A Halloween Haunting, Sam, written in red by Wayne Cole. Once again, I woke up drenched in sweat and screaming. The same nightmare has haunted my dreams on and off for the last 35 years. The worst part is that it isn't just a dream, it's a memory, a twisted version of something that actually happened. No amount of therapy can make it go away, because sometimes on stormy nights, my nightmare comes for me while I'm awake. As I climb out of bed and head to the shower, I could only hope for clear skies tonight. I got to work at 6 p.m. that night. It was a little early for me, but there was no way I could have gotten back to sleep. Working night shift at a gas station is not the most entertaining job, but at least early in the shift it's busy. More people coming through means that I can keep myself distracted and not let my mind wander. I knew that wouldn't last for long, though, and as the night went on, my mind would return to fixating on my nightmare. As the rain started to come down, my anxiety started to rise up. My mind returned to the rainy night in 1986, when my life changed forever. It was dark, and one of my headlights was out. The rain was coming down so hard I was struggling to make out the road. I should have been more nervous, but I was a stupid teenager. I was a quarterback, had multiple offers for scholarships, and I knew that I'd be getting out of this small mining town. It felt like nothing really bad could ever happen to me. My favorite song had just come on the radio, and I could barely hear it over the sound of the storm and the wipers. That was when I rounded the corner and saw the headlights right in front of me. Ding ding! The bell went off, signaling that someone had come into the station. I shook my head, trying to bring myself back to the present. My eyes turned to the front door and found my nightmare standing there. Lisa Matthews, the girl that I had crushed on all through my first 3 years of high school, was standing in my store, looking just like she did in 1986. She wore a Leatherman's jacket wrapped tightly around herself and was drenched from the rain. Her head was cut open, and the blood was mixing with the water and dripping onto the floor. Her clothes were torn, exposing her pale skin underneath. It wasn't smooth, though. There were bleeding cuts, and I could see a bone sticking out of her leg. She walked forward with a limp, but didn't seem to show any pain on her face. "Oh no, not again," I gasped, and fell backwards from the counter. This was not the first time I had seen her. It didn't seem to matter where I was. If it was storming out at night and I was alone, she always found me. My psychiatrist had told me that it was a hallucination fueled by my PTSD and survivor's guilt. I was supposed to face it down. "Please, just leave me alone." She looked at me, and I couldn't see any sense of recognition. Why would she know me, though? She wasn't real. She stepped forward, reaching one hand out. Her voice sounded as sweet as I remembered. "What's wrong with you?" "No, you aren't real. You aren't real." Panic overtook me, and I ran from behind the counter and into the back room, slamming the door behind me. There was no lock on the door, so I started pulling boxes in front of it. "She's not real. She's not real," I said, but I couldn't make myself believe it. I sat on the floor, rocking back and forth. Usually, she just shows up and then goes away after a minute or two. I told myself that I just needed to wait it out. Then she started pounding on the stockroom door. "Please help me," she screamed from the other side of the door. She said it a few times, getting softer each time. I was back in my car in 1986. The other driver and I had both swerved, but it wasn't enough, and we hit hard. I still don't know which one of us was on the wrong side of the road. Her car went into the ditch, and mine went flipping over. I sat there, held in by my seatbelt, with my car on its roof. Water pouring in the broken windows, and I hurt everywhere. Crawling out of the car, I managed to stand, but I couldn't put any weight on my right leg. I would later learn that my knee had been shattered. I braced myself against the car and then heard it. Please help me." It was a scream mixed with a sob, and it was coming from the other car. I looked over into the ditch and met eyes with Lisa. Her face was covered with blood, and she was panicking. "Just relax. Try not to move. It's going to be okay." I believed my words until I noticed the flames coming from under the hood of her car. Even with the rain, the fire spread quickly. I tried to move, but as soon as I let go of my car, I fell to the ground in pain. It hurt so much, and I could feel the heat from the flames. In my mind, I tell myself to crawl, to move, to just try and do something. That wasn't how it happened, though. I lay there in the rain and watched the car burn. She asked for my help, and I didn't do anything. I sat in the stockroom crying, like I had done that night. For me, that was the beginning of the end. My injuries ended my football career, but even if they hadn't, the depression and anxiety would have. I barely made it to graduation and never went to any kind of college. I couldn't be relied on, and that's how I found myself 52 years old, working nights at a gas station in the town I always thought I would escape. More accurately, hiding in the stockroom of that gas station, being haunted by memories of a person I watched die. The pounding had stopped, so I forced myself back into the station. I was alone again. Grabbing the mop, I started cleaning up the wet floor. The blood was gone, but the water was still there. At least one newspaper had gotten soaked. I didn't ask myself where the water had come from if she wasn't real. Questions like that never have answers I'm willing to live with. As I cleaned up that night, something felt different. It would be a while before I realized that I had stopped having the nightmares. I never saw Lisa while I was awake again. Author's note. After writing the first part of the story, I thought this perspective would be the easiest. It was the most obvious perspective to give, and I expected it to be the most straightforward. I had an idea in my head for how it was going to go as I wrote Lisa's part. Then I actually sat down to write it. In my original concept, Sam was much more of a bad guy, being punished for his actions. When I started writing, though, it just didn't feel right. Instead, he had become more sympathetic, and the idea of a clear good and evil dynamic really faded as I expanded on the story. Instead, to feel more Halloween appropriate, a story where everyone involved is struggling seemed to fit better. This chapter of Bite-Sized Tales has been brought to you under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives, 4.0 International License. Intro and outro music is Fantasy Motion by Alexander Nakarada, provided under a Creative Commons 4.0 license. If you enjoyed what you heard today, we would greatly appreciate reviews and recommendations to your friends. Finally, for more information about our authors, please visit bitesizedtales.com. We look forward to reading to you next time.